Hi, Uncle Larry here. What does it mean to be woke? By now, many of you will have heard the term woke. Some may be familiar with it, others don't really know what it means or where it came from. All kinds of literature devoted to the subject, to be sure, so my 10 or 15-minute attempt to boil it down might not be entirely adequate. But I'm going to try anyway. So, let's do this. Depending on your background and social circle, being woke could be either a compliment or an accusation. Briefly, for the woke, it means solidarity with victims of social injustice and siding with the powerless. It could refer to the feeling of waking up from our false consciousness to see the hidden systems of oppression that control you and ultimately control the world. Opponents accuse the woke of dividing us into categories like race, ethnicity, or gender, and seeing virtually every human interaction through the lens of unequal power relationships. They accuse being woke of trying to impose this new way of speaking about social injustice on everyone else, completely abandoning the notion of our common humanity. Woke is related to the largely retired term political correctness, but seems to be even more divisive and controversial. The specific origin of the expression is contested, but there is a general consensus that woke or stay woke is borrowed from African American culture going back to the early 20th century. So maybe we should look at that line of thinking. It was used by blues singer Leadbelly in a 1938 recording of Scottsboro Boys, a song which tells the story of 9 black teenagers accused of raping 2 white women, saying, quote, "I advise everybody be a little careful when they go along through there. Best stay woke, keep their eyes open," unquote. Clearly, staying woke back then was a survival tactic, telling black communities to remain on alert for false accusations. According to many scholars, woke or staying woke started to enter the mainstream vernacular after the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. You might recall it being popularized by the activist group Black Lives Matter, who sought to raise awareness about police shootings of African Americans. There were protests everywhere, including here in our city. From there, woke was adopted by non-blacks on the internet and in everyday conversations to indicate their support for Black Lives Matter. As time went on, its meaning evolved. Even further, it evolved into shorthand for awareness of a whole range of causes besides race, including gender, identity, unequal power relations, and white privilege. In short, woke was appropriated from black culture to include various other issues. Now, some say the broadening of this expression to cover other things in addition to race relations was a necessary reaction to the rise of right-wing populism around the world and the emergence of political figures like Donald Trump and some others. Others say it's precisely the opposite. Populism was and is an ongoing response to the perceived threat of wokeness. It's a huge middle finger to interpreting the world through this oppressor-oppressed archetype. The battle is very fierce. Thoroughly decent people with primarily moderate or conservative dispositions either don't understand this new woke vocabulary or they find it bewildering. They feel left out of the conversation altogether when it comes to talking about contemporary social issues. Even worse, they worry their own contributions to these matters might be discarded or canceled from the discussion if they deviate from this new way of articulating how injustice should be addressed. Now, whether you agree with him or not, in 2017, Boston Globe columnist Alex Beam wrote, quote, "The real purpose of woke is to divide the world into hyper-socially aware, self-appointed gatekeepers of language and behavior for the rest of humanity," unquote. It's also worthwhile pointing out how class divisions figure in this discussion. Now, listen close. This is significant. According to the 2021 census in Canada, the lower middle class and the working class together make up almost 2/3 of the population. The so-called professional class, which includes the upper middle and upper classes who usually possess at least one college degree, make up the smaller remaining 30%. Now, for a couple of generations, the concept of wokeness has been seeping out from colleges and universities into the broader culture. As a result, this smaller professional class, whether you find them in academia, in large corporations, in the technology sector, in the media, or in government, all tend to skew towards wokeness. This appears to run counter to the perspectives and values of a clear majority of the population, especially in rural and suburban Canada. While statistics are always rather fluid, and I get that, this apparent division between the smaller elite professional class and everybody else isn't healthy for a democracy. In politics, particularly on the right and center-right, woke has become a pejorative expression, no surprise, as they believe smaller professional elites are just trying to take over and control the speech and actions of everyone else. Meantime, on the far right, the extremist right, well, they're exploiting this unease for all it's worth. Grifters and hucksters everywhere are actively promoting unverifiable conspiracy theories about an emerging globalist woke dictatorship which will enslave us all. You can hear from my tone of voice that I think that's a little naive. It won't be happening anytime soon. However, misgivings about woke aren't just coming from the right. So let's go to the left. Yes, some on the left also have misgivings about how the term woke is used. Quite important here. First, they don't like how woke was literally stolen from black culture. Second, there are leftist critics who say using the woke vocabulary to identify oneself often amounts to little more than using lingo to score points, to gain acceptance by your desired tribe, without actually doing anything concrete to address injustice. It's just making noises, making the right noises, and that's supposed to be enough. Most significantly, there are critics from across the entire spectrum, left and right, who worry about another factor, the presentism associated with being woke. And this is my own major concern about wokeness. What is presentism? Presentism is viewing and judging the past by the standards of today. Let me say that again. Viewing and judging the past by the standards of today. Characterizing the people of history as nothing more than moral failures whose achievements should be dismissed. Any respectable historian knows that that attitude is a grievous error and runs counter to any genuine understanding of history. The people of history are not just failed copies of ourselves. What kind of hubris is that? Are we that unaware of our own horrible blind spots, which we currently aren't able to see, and that future generations will certainly point out? Come on. Making our past synonymous with moral evil, as a lot of presentism seems to do, is a form of intellectual vandalism, according to philosopher-historian Michael Shugrue. Now, if there's a term for this tendency, Shugrue might call it moral supremacy. But here's the thing. You cannot engineer a perfectly just world into existence by erasing the past. St. Augustine was right when he said human nature is not perfectible. Such utopianism is a conceptual mistake. Unfortunately, the zeal displayed by some woke activists suggests they think they know better, or are just more enlightened than our predecessors. Unbelievable. From my perspective, I don't see why anyone wouldn't advocate for the powerless. I respect people who stand guard for victims of injustice, and if you know me and you know my record, you know I certainly do. And in their own ways, many people of different ideological, political, and faith-based persuasions advocate for the vulnerable all the time. If that's all being woke means, well then, I suppose I'm woke. But if woke culture means silencing other viewpoints or claiming there's only one way to speak about things, or if it means a wholesale dismissal of the accomplishments of previous generations and just focusing on their moral failures, then let me tell you, I definitely am not woke. I suppose you could call me baffled right now, unmoored, homeless, and I'm not alone. If you see yourself as genuinely woke, the strength of your argument alone should mean that using the power of persuasion to get people to join you is sufficient. There's no need for coercion or censorship. Attempts to cancel different approaches to social injustice is a non-starter. Nothing is accomplished by weaponizing wokeness to cancel those who aren't sufficiently pure according to your definition. Has wokeness become such a weapon? Think about that. Opponents of wokeness say yes. On the other hand, perhaps woke is just a catch-all term which poorly informed opponents of woke culture use as shorthand for things they just don't like or for things they simply don't understand. If so, this practice is also just as wrong, and tit-for-tat attempts to censor the woke, which is also going on, is also a non-starter. Here's the bottom line. Either you believe in the free exchange of ideas or you don't. It cuts both ways. One thing should be clear. There is no real diversity if it doesn't include a diversity of perspectives. If viewpoint diversity is sacrificed for some notion of the greater good, what you're left with is a form of authoritarianism where one smaller professional elite class calls the shots for everyone else. Frankly, I prefer our imperfect democracy. I like the concept of uniting around our common humanity, not dividing us into grievance categories. So, there's my synopsis on what it means to be woke. There's way better stuff out there to read or listen to, and I probably missed a lot of stuff here. But maybe my little attempt will serve as a catalyst for you to investigate the concept of wokeness on your own. I hope so.